The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was blood across my right palm. I was lying on a cold wooden floor inside an unfamiliar bedroom, while rain hammered the windows and pain pulsed behind my eyes. A metal chain scraped across the room. I turned toward the sound and saw a silver-haired woman sitting beside an iron bed with one wrist locked to the frame. The woman had waist-length white hair, crimson eyes, and bruises circling both wrists. The moment I moved, she dragged herself backward until the chain pulled tight and whispered, "Please don't come closer." A brass key hung from a cord around my neck. When I touched it, the woman's eyes widened as though I had reached for a weapon. I asked who she was, and she stared at me as if the question itself were impossible. When I admitted I remembered nothing, not my name, the house, or the blood, she slowly raised her chained wrist and said, "You kidnapped me." I stood too quickly and nearly collapsed against the wall. My pockets contained an empty wallet, a cracked phone with no signal, and a wedding ring that felt unfamiliar on my finger. The woman said her name was Evelyn Reed and mine was Noah Carter. According to her, I had followed her from a charity event 11 days earlier, forced her into a car, and brought her to this abandoned house because she rejected me. I looked around and found the room arranged like evidence against me. Untouched food, chains bolted into the walls, photographs of Evelyn covering the dresser, and a knife with dried blood beside the bed. When I asked whether I had hurt her, Evelyn lowered her gaze toward the bruises and said, "You told me pain would prove how serious your love was." Her calm delivery made the accusation feel rehearsed, but I had no memory strong enough to challenge it. I used the brass key to open her cuff. The restraint fell away, yet Evelyn remained beside the bed rubbing her wrist and watching me as if freedom might be another trap. I told Evelyn she could leave, but she explained that the storm had flooded the forest road. The nearest house was several kilometers away, and the only car outside would not start. When I asked why she had not attacked me while I was unconscious, she said she did not know whether the man who woke up would be different. I found a first aid kit beneath the sink and cleaned the cut on my palm. Evelyn knew which cupboard contained the bandages before I opened it, then claimed she had watched me use them during the first week of her captivity. The kitchen contained enough food for weeks, all labeled in neat handwriting. Evelyn reached for the tea, opened the correct drawer for spoons, and moved through the room without searching for a single switch, yet insisted she had never seen the house before I kidnapped her. My phone gallery contained hundreds of photographs of Evelyn taken from a distance. The final image showed her asleep with her head on my shoulder, looking peaceful enough to make the kidnapping story feel impossible. Evelyn snatched the phone and claimed the photograph had been taken before she understood how dangerous I was. I asked why my face looked relaxed too, and she answered that obsession often looked gentle before it became violent. A locked cabinet in the living room contained passports, cash, medication, and 2 matching wedding bands. One band carried my name, while the other was engraved with hers. Evelyn said I had purchased the rings because I planned to force her into marriage. Then I read the engraving on mine. 5 years, and still forever. A kidnapping lasting 11 days should not have contained a 5th anniversary message. The passport bearing Evelyn's photograph listed her surname as Carter and her marital status as married. When I demanded the truth, she did not defend the kidnapping story. She only asked whether I felt anything when I looked at her. I told her I felt frightened, confused, and increasingly certain she had lied about everything. The answer wounded her more deeply than anger, and for the first time her carefully controlled expression broke. A memory flashed without warning. Evelyn's silver hair across a pillow, her arms around my waist, and her voice whispering that I belonged beside her. When the vision vanished, she stepped toward me and asked whether I had remembered our bedroom. The word "our" ended the lie. Evelyn admitted she was my wife, we had been married for 5 years, and the lake house belonged to us. 3 weeks earlier, a car accident had erased the last 6 years of my memory, including every day of our relationship. She said I had woken in the hospital remembering my childhood, education, and company, but not her. When she introduced herself as my wife, I accused her of fabricating the marriage and demanded she leave my room. I asked how that justified chaining herself to a bed and convincing me I was a criminal. Evelyn admitted she feared that if I believed I was free, I would leave before my memories returned, so she created a story powerful enough to make guilt keep me close. She had brought me to the lake house while I was medicated, arranged the photographs, bolted chains into the walls, disabled the car, and locked herself beside the bed. She believed I would remain to understand what I had supposedly done and slowly begin caring about her again. The bruises around her wrists were real. Evelyn had worn the cuffs for 2 days before I woke and repeatedly pulled against them until her skin darkened, because she worried fake injuries would not convince me. I told her I was leaving as soon as the storm cleared. For 1 second her crimson eyes sharpened and her fingers dug into the table, but she forced herself to step away from the doorway and said she would not chain me now that I knew the truth. The front door was unlocked and the windows opened normally. A second set of car keys waited beside the entrance, yet the car battery had been removed and the landline cord had been cut cleanly with a knife. Each discovery reversed the original story. Evelyn had been the one holding me inside the house, but she had chained herself so I would believe the control belonged to me. I locked myself inside the study and searched every drawer. Company papers identified me as the founder of Carter Systems, while photographs showed my business partner Marcus Hale standing beside Evelyn and me at our wedding. My cracked phone suddenly found 1 bar of signal. Marcus called immediately, asked where I was, and warned me not to trust Evelyn because she had removed me from the hospital against medical advice and disappeared before police could question her. Marcus told me to lock the door, refuse any medication Evelyn offered, and reach a ranger station 3 kilometers north. He said doctors found an unusual sedative in my blood after the crash and suspected someone close to me had been drugging me. Evelyn lunged forward and ended the call. She insisted Marcus was responsible for the crash because he had been stealing money from our company, and I had discovered the fraud shortly before someone tampered with my car. I asked why she had hidden such a serious threat until Marcus called. Evelyn said she needed me to remember her before filling my mind with another enemy, which sounded like protection shaped into another form of control. Marcus left a voicemail promising police would meet me at the ranger station. Evelyn stood between me and the study door, then deliberately moved aside and said she would show me everything even if the truth made me hate her. She led me downstairs to a steel security door hidden behind the wine cellar. Her fingerprint opened it, revealing a room filled with monitors, hard drives, photographs, and printed timelines covering nearly every year of my adult life. At first I thought the room belonged to my cybersecurity company. Then I saw images of myself outside restaurants, at university, inside my first apartment, and during meetings that happened years before Evelyn claimed we had met. Evelyn admitted she had watched me for almost 2 years before introducing herself. She memorized my schedule, learned my coffee order, studied my friends, and arranged repeated, accidental meetings until I finally asked for her number. Files on my former partners revealed unexpected job offers, anonymous accusations, and investigations that pushed them out of my life. Evelyn said she never physically harmed anyone. She only removed people who might take me somewhere she could not follow. I asked whether our marriage contained a single choice she had not influenced. Evelyn answered, "You chose to love me. I only removed the reasons you might hesitate." Another memory struck me. Evelyn crying in our kitchen while I held a tracking device found beneath my car, a packed suitcase waiting beside the door. I had discovered her monitoring and threatened to leave. The memory continued in fragments. Evelyn had fallen to her knees and promised therapy, surrendered passwords, removed trackers, and accepted supervised separation whenever she violated an agreement. I had given her one final chance. Back in the basement, I asked whether she kept that promise. Evelyn said she dismantled most of the surveillance, but secretly maintained the lake house system because it was the only place she could watch over me without interfering with daily life. I told her the fake kidnapping proved she had learned nothing. Evelyn said the hospital staff warned her I might never love her again and that she had to accept whatever life I chose. She survived 2 days before taking me away. I asked whether she had drugged me before the crash. Evelyn immediately opened a locked drawer containing blood tests showing the sedative matched a prescription from Dr. Lena Ward, a neurologist Marcus had recommended. The dosage on the report was far higher than Dr. Ward claimed to have administered. Evelyn believed Marcus had paid someone at the clinic to increase it before I drove home. But after everything she had admitted, belief was not enough. I copied the files onto a portable drive and told Evelyn I was walking to the ranger station alone. She followed me upstairs without argument and stood under the doorway holding her wedding ring while I stepped into the rain. After 50 meters, I heard footsteps behind me. Evelyn had followed without shoes, her pale feet already cut by stones, and promised to stay 10 steps behind if I allowed her to remain close enough to protect me. I continued through the flooded trail while Evelyn maintained the exact distance. Every time I looked back, she stopped immediately, proving she could obey a boundary only when disobedience risked losing sight of me completely. Headlights appeared through the trees. A dark SUV stopped across the path, and Marcus stepped out beneath an umbrella looking calm, familiar, and visibly relieved to see me. Marcus moved forward to embrace me, then stopped when I raised the kitchen knife. He said police were nearby and Evelyn had probably filled my head with stories, while her expression hardened behind me. Marcus showed messages supposedly sent from my phone the night before the crash. They said I was leaving Evelyn, feared she might harm herself, and planned to stay at his apartment. He played a recording in my own voice warning that Evelyn had become dangerous and that Marcus should take evidence to the police if anything happened to me. Evelyn admitted the recording was real but said it came from our worst argument months earlier. Evelyn produced a therapy card showing weekly appointments with Dr. Miriam Cross. Marcus barely glanced at it before dismissing it, and that tiny reaction bothered me because someone genuinely surprised would have looked. I asked how Marcus found us. He said police traced the phone call, but there were no sirens or additional vehicles. Evelyn pointed out that his SUV tires carried no mud from the flooded Ranger Road, meaning he had used the private service route connected to our property. Marcus's friendly expression slipped for half a second. He urged me into the SUV and warned that Evelyn might become violent, but another memory hit before I could move. I remembered Marcus inside my office, his hand on my shoulder, while financial records on the desk showed millions transferred through accounts bearing his authorization. When I confronted him, he smiled and said nobody would believe evidence collected by a man married to an obsessive stalker. The forest returned as Marcus reached for me. I stepped back and asked how much money he had stolen. His face became empty, and the reassuring friend vanished. Marcus pulled a handgun from beneath his coat and aimed at Evelyn. He claimed she had fabricated the financial records to isolate me from my oldest friend. I noticed a medical case on the SUV passenger seat containing syringes identical to those used at the hospital. Marcus saw where I was looking and ordered me into the vehicle. Evelyn stepped directly in front of the gun. She told Marcus he could shoot her, but he would have to do it while I watched, because some part of me would still hate whoever hurt her even if my memories never returned. Marcus called her insane. Evelyn smiled faintly and answered, "That has never made me wrong." The line distracted him long enough for me to strike his wrist with the flashlight. The gun fired into the trees and all three of us fell into the mud. Evelyn wrapped the umbrella strap around Marcus's wrist and slammed his hand against the ground until the weapon came loose. I grabbed the gun and ordered them apart. Evelyn immediately stepped back, while Marcus stayed on his knees and accused her of training for the day she could finally kill him. Evelyn admitted she had imagined killing Marcus many times, then looked at me and added that imagining something was not the same as doing it. Her honesty was unsettling, but for once it contained no manipulation. I forced Marcus to open the medical case. Beneath the syringes were forged prescriptions, copies of my company credentials, and a second phone containing messages sent under my name. The evidence proved Marcus had manufactured part of the story, but it did not prove Evelyn had told the truth about everything else. I realized I was standing between one man who wanted my money and one woman who wanted every part of me. A siren finally sounded in the distance. Marcus smiled and claimed the police would arrest Evelyn the moment they saw the chains and surveillance room. Evelyn calmly revealed she had already transmitted the basement files to Detective Sophia Reed before removing me from the hospital. She used herself and my missing phone as bait, knowing Marcus would eventually trace us and arrive without police support. I asked whether the staged kidnapping had also been part of the trap. Evelyn looked almost offended and answered, "No, That part was entirely because I couldn't bear you leaving me. Police vehicles entered the service road. Detective Sophia Reed took the gun from me, arrested Marcus after seeing the evidence, and then turned toward Evelyn with the exhausted expression of someone who already knew she had ignored every instruction. At the police station, Sophia explained that I had contacted her before the accident. I suspected Marcus of embezzlement but feared he would destroy evidence if confronted too early. I had also warned Sophia about Evelyn's surveillance and controlling behavior. I did not trust my wife completely, but her obsession made her unusually skilled at uncovering threats connected to me. On the night of the crash, I planned to deliver Marcus's financial records to Sophia and then meet Evelyn at Dr. Cross's clinic to decide whether our marriage could continue under strict legal and therapeutic boundaries. Marcus had increased my sedative dosage through the clinic, tampered with my brakes, and expected the crash to kill me. When it failed, he positioned himself as the trustworthy friend who could guide my missing memories. Evelyn removed me from the hospital because she discovered Marcus had changed my discharge instructions and tried to transfer me to a private rehabilitation center he controlled. That explained why she ran, but not why she turned protection into a kidnapping performance. Sophia said the official plan was to take me to a protected location, show verified records, and let doctors explain my condition. Evelyn instead took me to our lake house, chained herself to the bed, disabled transportation, and cut the phone line. When Sophia asked why she transformed a protection operation into a psychological hostage drama, Evelyn answered, "Because the official plan allowed him to choose a life without me." No one spoke for several seconds. Sophia handed me a sealed envelope I had left before the crash. My handwriting across the front read, "For Noah, if memory becomes unreliable." The letter described Marcus's betrayal, Evelyn's stalking, our marriage, and the boundaries I planned to establish. It warned that both people would try to influence me and neither should be trusted without evidence. The final pages said Evelyn loved me with an intensity that often became control, but she had attended therapy, surrendered passwords, removed trackers, and accepted supervised separation for 6 months. The letter also said I still loved her. I had not planned to divorce her that night. I intended to offer one final year of marriage under a legal contract requiring therapy, transparency, and immediate separation if she manipulated my choices again. At the bottom I had written, "If she ignores all of this and locks you in the lake house anyway, try not to be too surprised." I read the sentence twice before looking at Evelyn, who appeared genuinely embarrassed for the first time. Evelyn asked whether the letter instructed me to forgive her. I said the old version of me had predicted her crime but offered no guidance on how much insanity a head injury required me to tolerate. Evelyn said she would accept prison, divorce, or never seeing me again. Her voice remained steady until the final option, and I understood that accepting a choice did not mean she could survive it gracefully. She placed the brass cuff key on the table and admitted she had kept a second copy the entire time. The lock had never trapped her physically. The chain existed only to trap me emotionally. Another memory surfaced. Evelyn at our wedding altar promising she would choose me in every life, even one where I forgot her. Love and anger returned together, impossible to separate. I told Evelyn I could not return to the marriage as though nothing happened. I needed independent doctors, my own apartment, full access to every account, and the freedom to decide whether I wanted her in my life after learning who I had been. Evelyn agreed to every condition. When I added that she could never chain herself, fake a crime, disable transportation, impersonate a victim, or emotionally blackmail an amnesiac again, she asked whether the rule applied only to me or generally. Sophia covered her face with one hand. Evelyn spent the next month under psychiatric observation while Marcus's case moved forward. I lived in a secured apartment and met with specialists who said my missing memories might return gradually or never return completely. Evelyn wrote every day but sent the letters through Dr. Miriam Cross. The early letters apologized. The later ones described ordinary details and how many times she resisted asking security guards where I had gone. One letter simply said, "Today I missed you without following you. Dr. Cross says that counts as progress." I laughed before I could stop myself. 3 months after the lake house, I agreed to meet Evelyn in the rehabilitation center garden. She wore a simple white dress, no jewelry except her wedding ring, and kept both hands visible on the table as if attending a negotiation. She asked how much I remembered. I told her enough to know I had once loved her and enough to understand why I had nearly left. Evelyn said she no longer wanted guilt, habit, or a false kidnapping to keep me beside her. Evelyn said she wanted me to choose her while knowing exactly what she was. When I asked whether she could accept rejection, she remained silent for too long, then admitted she would survive it even if she hated every moment. I did not put my wedding ring back on. Instead, I agreed to one supervised dinner the following week. One dinner became several, and Evelyn began asking before ordering for me instead of using knowledge gathered through surveillance. My memories returned in fragments over the next year. Sometimes a scent restored an entire evening. Other times I remembered loving Evelyn fiercely without recalling what she had done to earn it. Marcus was convicted of attempted murder, fraud, identity theft, and medical tampering. During the trial he claimed Evelyn was more dangerous than he had ever been, and I could not completely disagree. Marcus wanted control because it made him powerful. Evelyn wanted control because freedom terrified her. Fear did not excuse what she had done, but understanding it gave us somewhere honest to begin. A year after the accident, Evelyn and I returned to the lake house with Sophia, Dr. Cross, and a locksmith. We removed every chain, hidden camera, reinforced lock, and surveillance device from the property. When the final chain fell from the bedroom wall, Evelyn admitted part of her still believed love meant making escape impossible. I told her love meant leaving the door open and trusting someone to remain. When she asked what happened if they left, I answered that she had to let them. She hated the answer but nodded. We sold the lake house the following month. Evelyn watched the moving truck carry away the last box of surveillance equipment, then handed the property keys to the new owner without keeping a copy. I checked twice, and she looked offended that I checked only twice. 2 years after the accident, most of my memories had returned, though not in perfect order. I remembered our first apartment, our wedding, the fights, the quiet mornings, and the exact expression Evelyn wore whenever she discovered I had come home later than promised. We were still married, but we maintained separate offices, separate passwords, and boundaries long enough to qualify as a legal handbook. Evelyn remained jealous, possessive, and suspicious of anyone who learned my coffee order too quickly. The difference was that she now described those feelings to Dr. Cross instead of purchasing background reports, interfering with careers, or disabling vehicles. Most of the time, progress looked less like becoming normal and more like choosing not to act on the first terrifying idea that entered her mind. At a business dinner, a consultant touched my sleeve while laughing at a joke. Evelyn noticed from across the table, and I saw the old darkness gather behind her crimson eyes. Instead of interrupting, she took one slow breath, opened the shared boundary app on her phone, and typed, "I am experiencing an unreasonable desire to remove this woman from the building." I read the message beneath the table and replied, "Thank you for not doing that." Evelyn stared at her plate for several seconds before adding, "You are welcome. I would like recognition that this required significant effort." I gave her credit, and she spent the rest of dinner looking proud of herself for allowing another human being to remain employed. Marcus received a 23-year sentence after the court confirmed the fraud, forged medical records, and attempted murder. During the final hearing, he looked at me and said Evelyn would eventually destroy every part of my life he had failed to take. Evelyn rose from her seat, but Sophia placed one hand on her shoulder, and she sat down again without threatening him once. Outside the courtroom, Evelyn asked whether silently imagining Marcus falling down the courthouse stairs violated our agreement. I told her thoughts were not crimes. She considered that answer, then said therapy had become much more useful now that she understood how many things she was still permitted to imagine. On the anniversary of the accident, Evelyn asked me to meet her in the botanical garden where we had held our first supervised conversation. She arrived early but did not check my location when I was 7 minutes late. I knew because the shared account showed no access attempts, although the fact that I checked whether she checked proved we were both still recovering in different ways. She handed me a small box but did not open it. Inside was a new wedding ring engraved with the words, "Chosen again," Evelyn said the old ring represented a life I had forgotten and a marriage she had tried to preserve through control. The new one would mean nothing unless I placed it on my own hand. I did not answer immediately. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her skirt, but she kept both hands in her lap and did not reach for me, close the path, or explain why saying no would be a terrible mistake. The restraint in that silence mattered more than any promise she could have made. I asked what she would do if I refused. Evelyn looked toward the open garden gate and said she would go home, call Dr. Cross, cry until she became dehydrated, and return the next morning without breaking into my apartment. It was not a romantic answer, but it was the most honest one she had ever given me. I placed the ring inside my pocket instead of on my finger. Evelyn's face fell, but I told her I wanted to remember one more thing before making the choice. She nodded and walked beside me through the garden without asking which memory I meant. That night, the missing memory returned. I saw our first real meeting in a crowded cafe, where Evelyn pretended to spill coffee near my table so she could offer me napkins. I had known the spill was deliberate because the cup had been empty, yet I invited her to sit anyway because her nervous determination amused me. The memory continued beyond the manipulation. I remembered choosing to call her the next morning, choosing to see her again, and choosing to propose despite knowing she was jealous, intense, and far too interested in my daily schedule. Evelyn had arranged the opening, but the relationship that followed had contained choices of my own. I returned to the bedroom where Evelyn was reading beside the open door. She looked up when I entered but did not ask where I had been or why the ring box was still in my pocket. I sat beside her and said I remembered choosing her the first time. Evelyn closed her book so quickly that the pages bent. I told her remembering the choice did not erase the stalking, the chains, or the years of control, but it reminded me that my love had never been entirely manufactured. She listened without interrupting, tears gathering in her crimson eyes. I removed the new ring from my pocket and held out my hand. Evelyn stared at it as if she no longer trusted hopeful images, then asked whether I wanted her to place it on my finger. I said yes, and her hands trembled so badly that she missed twice before the ring finally settled into place. She leaned toward me, stopped a few centimeters away, and asked permission before kissing me. That single question carried more weight than every dramatic vow she had ever made. I answered by closing the distance myself. The following week, Evelyn suggested renewing our vows. I agreed only if the ceremony had open doors, no hidden contracts, no trackers in the rings, and no language implying eternal ownership. She accepted every condition, then asked whether devoted beyond reasonable medical standards was still available. Dr. Cross removed that phrase from the draft. We held the ceremony in a glass-walled garden pavilion with Sophia and Dr. Cross as witnesses. Evelyn wore a simple white dress and walked toward me alone, without anyone delivering her, directing her, or guaranteeing what I would choose when she reached the table. Evelyn promised to love me without arranging my choices, protect me without creating a prison, and speak when fear made her want to control me. I promised to tell her when I felt trapped instead of quietly building resentment until escape seemed like the only option. After the vows, Sophia inspected both rings with a handheld scanner because she did not trust Evelyn's definition of decorative technology. The rings were clean. Evelyn looked personally insulted that Sophia believed she might hide a tracker inside mine, then admitted she had considered it for approximately 4 minutes. That evening, I entered our bedroom and noticed the door slowly closing behind me. I looked at Evelyn, who was sitting on the bed with the most innocent expression she could produce. She claimed the wind had moved it, although every window was shut. I opened the door again. Evelyn watched, sighed dramatically, and made no attempt to close it a second time. That small moment explained our marriage better than any ceremony. She still wanted every exit locked, but she was learning to remain beside an open one. I stayed because I chose to, not because I had lost my memory, not because guilt convinced me I was a kidnapper, and not because Evelyn made escape impossible. Still, when she leaned against my shoulder that night, I noticed the old brass cuff key hanging from a silver chain beneath her collar. She followed my gaze and calmly said it was only sentimental. I decided not to ask what she meant by only. The next morning, I asked Evelyn why she still wore the key after promising to remove every chain from our life. She stirred her coffee and said throwing it away would pretend the lake house never happened, while keeping it reminded her exactly what fear could turn her into. I accepted the explanation, but told her the key was never to touch a lock again. Evelyn agreed, then suggested placing it inside a glass display box with an alarm that notified both of us if the lid opened. I stared at her until she slowly removed the part about the alarm. We settled on an ordinary box beside our wedding photograph, visible but powerless, like the past itself. Sometimes I still woke from dreams believing I was back on that wooden floor and she was chained beside the bed. Whenever it happened, Evelyn stayed where I could see her and asked whether I wanted comfort or distance. The answer changed from night to night and she learned to accept both. That was how I knew the woman beside me was no longer pretending to be my victim, or treating love as permission to make me hers.